Okay, our third step in this exercise, which is the second step in this painting, is to take that flat, simple beginning and then to start to develop it with this 7-step scale that we have. And by developing, I mean looking a little bit more closely at the light and the nature of this form that we're painting, and principally the idea of creating a kind of volumetric structure. So how do we do that? How do we go from something just flat, just a simple average of light and shadow, to something that's going to give it more of a sense of roundness or volume? And on a flat surface, it's very simple what makes that happen. And that is a value progression, and that's one of the reasons we're starting with value, of light to dark or dark to light. That progression is going to make something appear to turn on a flat surface. So going from lighter to a little bit darker to a little bit darker, that's what makes things look like they're turning in space. All right, so the first step in that is to identify for yourself which direction the light is coming from, because the form is going to gradate darker as it moves away from that light. So it's important to look and see what's happening on the object, but it's also important to form an idea in your head of where the light is and how the form has to gradate in order to create that illusion of volume. So with this, my light is over on the left side, obviously, because I have the shadow over here on the right side, right? So the light's coming in this direction. That means no matter what I think I see on the form, things have to get progressively darker as I go across the surface of that form, or as I go across this surface up here. Things have to get darker because light diminishes over space. So in other words, the further away you get from the light source, the darker things are going to be. So you might have your apple and you might say, well, it just looks just as light over here as it does over here, so I'm going to make it the same. Well, if you do that, you're going to just keep a flat apple. You're not going to get it to turn, right? So you have to, no matter what you think you see, you have to realize that the truth of the matter is that things are darkening, even though it might be very subtle in your situation. Things are darkening as they move away from the light source. So the first thing is to not necessarily look and see what's happening on the form, but to look at the light and form an idea about what you know to be true about that gradation. All right, so I know that things are going to be gradating lighter to darker in order to give that sense of turning. In the shadow, it's a little bit different because that gradation is formed by what's called reflected light. So the light comes down, it bounces off the surface, bounces back, and so I get a gradation of light to dark this way. So this will be lighter than this area, which is further away from that reflected light source. That's what's creating the volume in the shadow. So I've gone ahead and drawn in these gradations, so lighter to darker, lighter to darker, and then lighter to darker, and then down here, it may be hard to see, but I've got a lighter over here, darker over here. All right, so I'm going to see what I can do with these values in making that happen. Now, the final point, which is really important to keep in mind, is that we've started off with a certain light-dark structure here. We want to hold on to it. So in other words, I don't want to make judgments here that all of a sudden make part of this feel like it belongs to the shadow, right? Like I don't want to extend the shadow by making this too dark. So I have to try to keep the integrity of these large light and shadow shapes. So I don't want to put anything down here. I can't put down a value that's so light that it's going to seem to break up this larger shape that I started with. So these big shapes that we begin with, they have a particular kind of monumentality or power to them graphically. And so we want to hold on to them. So as I plug in these refinements, I want to try to hold on to that initial large shape that I began with. All right. So I'm just going to put in the light. I'm going to go from one value to 3 values. And I'm going to try to keep my middle, this average that I put in. What you have to do is you have to look at your average and you have to decide, okay, if I'm going lighter, if I have to go light to dark, if I have to put in 3 values instead of 1, is my middle value, the one that I chose, is that really in the middle? Is it on the dark end or is it on the light end? So with mine, I think what I'm going to do is put in a darker value here, or a lighter value here, a darker one here, and then I'll leave this one the way it is, right? That's the way it worked out. But if I had blocked in on the darker side so that my average was kind of on the dark side, then I might leave that average here and put in a lighter value and then a lighter value there. So how you develop it kind of depends on the averages that you put in and exactly where they are. Is it a perfect average that you can go lighter and darker from? Or is it an average that's on the light side and you have to go darker from? Or is it an average on the dark side that you have to go lighter from? All right, so it gets a little, harder to sort of figure out where each one of you are with this. Here, here I can, at this early stage, I sort of know where you guys are beginning, but the next step, the idea is just to keep in mind you're trying to create a gradation and you're trying to hold on to these initial large light and dark shapes that you started with. Okay, I'll come back when I've plugged these in.